Welcome to World of Monsters, and welcome to this installment into the Cryptozoology series. I'm Monster Master Arthur, and how these series differ is they go in depth with creatures or monstrous phenomena. So unlike the other series, with this series I go in depth exploring whether this phenomena could be real, whether this monster could be real, looking at the best evidence out there, forming my own sort of conclusion, as well as sharing my own experiences related to that phenomena, if I've had any. These series are also a great introduction to the people researching this cryptid for the first time, as well as for those looking for a nice source of compiled information on that cryptid. My goal with this series, as well as other series on this channel, is to present you with as much information on the topic as possible in the shortest amount of time. So get comfortable and kick up your awareness up a notch, as there's going to be a lot of information coming at you. As today's cryptozoological topic is Sasquatch. And remember, your watching not only supports this channel, but also the research that goes into, well, these cryptids, and later in the future getting future updates on them and the newest and latest notable footage and updates. Sasquatch, as locals in North America know it as, is also very well known as Bigfoot, though the term Sasquatch comes from a Canadian Native American Salish term for hairy man in the circa of 1925 to 1930. As mentioned, we also know it as Bigfoot, Yeti, Abominable Snowman, Grassman, the Almas, Wild Man, or Yeren in China, Bushman to the Eskimos, Hairy Man to the Tula River Indians, Yowie as they call it in Australia, and under various names in the North American Native American tribes such as Stickman, Basket Woman, Yayali. Then in the States there's also the Boggy Creek Monster, and Honey Island Swamp Monster, Skunk Ape, Pakistan's Barmanu, Urayuli of Southwest Alaska, Nitewa of Sri Lanka, Chichune of Siberia, and others. Now do excuse if I mispronounce some of them. Now before we get started, I would like you to possibly share two things with me. There's going to be a poll up above here somewhere asking about whether, first of all, you believe in Bigfoot. Yes, no, maybe so. And after watching the whole video, if you change your mind, please do share as well. I'd like to see that. And you can do so by editing your original comment or by just replying to it with the update. And also, let me know your experiences. If you've had any Bigfoot experiences or know of someone that has shared it with you, a family member, a friend, whoever, please share those experiences down below, and you are most welcome to send me a private messages with those experiences as well, or with any cryptid out there. Let us begin with Sasquatch's history and description, just in case you've never heard of this large, furry, or hairy cryptid. And remember, this is a huge, broad topic, so if you want a future video on a more specific type of Bigfoot, shall we call it, such as the Yeti or Alma, then do let me know down below. But in the United States, reports claim them to appear up to 9 feet tall, which means, as you can see here, he would simply tower above me. The Sasquatch would be big enough to easily hurl large rocks and to lift some as much as 2,000 pounds. Now the other geographically known version of Bigfoot, probably the first or second most well-known version of Bigfoot, is called the Yeti, and that one seems to grow to a shorter height of up to 7 feet. And then we have an even smaller version, the Orang Pendek of Sumatra, which reaches only around 3 feet tall. So we have these undiscovered bipedal hairy creatures that roam around us from 3 to 9 feet tall worldwide. And again, most of the accounts of this particular cryptid, and depending on location, it could be from white to yellow to dark browns and reds. Focusing more on the North American Sasquatch version, it's said to lack a prominent chin, it has a large flat nose, no forehead, large receded eyes, huge brown ridges, long arms, a bulky, robust body, and a head that's tucked into the torso. Seemingly all are said to have an elusive nature. They're known to build simple tree structures reminiscent of other great known primates out there. Many of such have been reported from Vancouver. As far as their communication, people have said to hear roars, howls, and barks, as well as high-pitched elk or deer kissing-like noises. Also, people speak of tapping communication, where they tap a branch or a stick against another piece of wood. And then there's a communication that people also call gifting, where they set an arrangement of stones and sticks and things like that upon the ground or a large slate of stone, and they leave it there for days or weeks and then return to find the arrangement switched about. And the arrangements get switched about in a rather fascinating manner too, which suggests that this must be something different than, let's say, a raccoon just bumping into it. They have also long been said to have a strong, pungent smell, hence also the given name of skunk ape. Some believe for Sasquatch to live a long time, up to 900 years, according to Native American John Two Birds, who says they can actually make you think that they're a tree to hide themselves from us. And this also brings up some theories of being extremely camouflaged, as upon in-depth hair inspection, some researchers found the hair to be translucent in nature, leading to the idea that light is reflected, allowing the creature to become virtually invisible. But you know what? Polar bears also have translucent fur, as well as other animals, and they're quite visible to us. Sasquatch have also been associated with UFOs. They've been reported to enter and exit such craft. And oddly enough, human disappearances in national parks, UFO and Bigfoot sightings, all three of them have a habit of taking place in near proximities and ranges of time. Different Sasquatch have also been reported to not only shift in color as this man reports,
and then the color of the hair changed from bright red color to brown, black, even multicolored.
But as this account shows, during a trip to the Sasquatch outpost in Bailey, Colorado, a hot spot for sightings.
So yeah, it's a couple who have a gifting site. I don't know if you saw that in the museum, where they go out and put gifts out and then go back and see if anything's been changed. So they had one not far from here, and they've been checking on it regularly. And the last time they had their grandchildren with them, and they were coming back out away from the gifting site, and the little girl kept looking behind her with binoculars, because often that's what people say, is you see Bigfoot looking at you as you're leaving, or you don't see him, but that's, they come out when you're leaving. And all of a sudden she turned around and she said, look, do you see him? And so the grandfather got his binoculars, and sure enough, he could see one, and maybe you can remember the details. He saw, this was at the bonfire evening. Okay. I don't know if he saw two straight away, or if he saw one and then later another one. But he said at some point it just kind of shrugged and turned and walked away and just disappeared, same as you were saying with the UFO.
It said it appeared to step through some kind of a shimmering portal.
Yes, that's right, it was shimmering.
He said, is that, I'm not quoting him exactly, he said it stepped it through a shimmering portal.
Right. And to him, that somehow made it tied up to UFOs.
How old was the little girl?
10.
So it appears that they've even been sighted crossing through a dimensional door or shimmering portal. And again, I thank the owner for sharing that with me very much. They've been said to influence and read minds and intentions. Hence, many researchers advise on approaching the search with peace in mind and not negative or violent intentions. In other words, don't bring a gun. There are many reports of electronics malfunctioning when in the vicinity of a Bigfoot. Electronics such as, of course, cameras. Go figure. Now, having gotten a good taste of the description of Bigfoot, let's take a look at what started this whole Sasquatch phenomena, when it started, when it got popularized, and after that, we'll take a look at notable, heavy, realistic, believable, convincible cases. The history. Accounts of wild men and giants go back thousands of years. Enkidu of the Epic of Gilgamesh was a wild man raised by animals and ignorant of human society. He was said to be formed of clay and saliva from the mother goddess. Then there's other mentionings of giants, such as in the Bible, for example Goliath of the David and Goliath tale. Then there's also these that have been quickly growing in attention all over the internet, the Ancient Nephilim. The Nephilim were said to be the gigantic offspring of gods, or as yet others believe as demons, corresponding with a whole different theory of the missing link in human evolution and development. And those are just a very few historical mentionings of giants and furry wild men living in the forests, and I emphasize the word very. And we have great aged evidence of something strange within the pictographs of the Tula River Native Americans, depicting the hairy man. These cave paintings predate the European settler arrival at least 500 years. Native Americans lived side by side and accepted Sasquatch, which again is actually a Native American name. They accepted it as part of their world. Only shamans or medicine men had the right to interact with them. And as we can see in these pictographs, the hairy man appeared sad, as he so appears in the creation story, and I wonder why, considering how much so-called modern humanity has changed the natural world that the Native Americans used to know. And by the way, BigfootProject.org has the most interesting article on these pictographs titled An Archaeological Viewpoint of the Hairy Man Pictographs. In Europe, there's also the Wild Men of the Woods, which as you can see here are depicted with hair completely covering their bodies. Moving up some time to the 15th century, we have a reported sighting that took place in Caucasus and Pamir Mountains of Central Asia, a sighting of the Almas, their locally known Bigfoot. In 1840, we have one of the first reported mentionings of large footprints, which actually comes from Native American lore. In 1870, the Wild Man of Crow Canyon. It was a reported case of a campsite raided by 5-foot man-like creatures with much longer arms than us, short legs and neck, and covered with fur. And keep in mind the dates here, that's 1870. 1895, one of the first eyewitness accounts, where a couple of men encountered the large creature walking on 2 legs that cut their trip shorter. In preparation to leave the forest, one of them was found dead with a broken neck and a 4-fanged bite mark. This was published by President Theodore Roosevelt. 1958. Gerald Crew discovered and casted footprints at a construction site. And this is when the article writer of that newspaper first coined the identification of this creature as Bigfoot. As these years started to bring about numerous footprint casts, they also did many hoaxes. At this time, many enthusiast and researcher eyes became focused on California and Washington. Willow Creek, California fast became a hotspot and Bigfoot capital, opening their own Bigfoot museum. In China, many people became eyewitnesses at the same time to the Chinese wild man. The government even launched an expedition searching for it, finding footprints and feces. Red hair samples also were discovered, but no DNA was found as they were seemingly too old. During research, they were often mentioned to appear unnatural, to have some sort of artificial coloring, and being most likely of Asian in origin. Were they colored or dyed by humans? Or part of some costume ensemble? Most likely. Even Vietnam has its own bipedal furry phenomenon. The Nguyen Rung, translated as the forest people, have a few interesting cases pertaining to it, and researchers have even also collected a track plaster cast. Still being on the history portion of this presentation on Bigfoot, I would like to draw your attention to the government interaction. I think this is a fascinating part of any research of cryptids, cryptozoology, and phenomena out there. I think it is also an extremely important side to these discussions. The presence of the mysterious Men in Black has appeared in reports as they have correlated with UFO sightings as well. And I think the Men in Black topic is extremely fascinating. Once you're done with researching Bigfoot, I implore you to go check out my previous videos in this series exploring the Men in Black. Now, they are a little bit older, a few months, well, let's say over a year older than this one, but I do advise that you check it out as I cover a lot of information there, as well as cases and things like that, which may convince you that they are more than just a Hollywood creation. We go back to national park disappearances. For example, this disappearance of a 20-year-old man and a 22-year-old man just less than 2 weeks apart in Olympic National Park just this April 2017. The Park Service wouldn't allow the searchers sniffing dogs or surge benefiting flares. The park's lack of care and interest stumped and just surprised and confused many people. A national park's full missing person list costs thousands of dollars, or over $1 million for all lists. So if you're not very rich and caring about the topic, I don't see the norm doing much about this. Again, the purpose of this video is to share as much information on Bigfoot as possible, so I do not dwell on some cases, but The point is to point people in the various directions where they can further the research, and missing cases of national parks are a great area of deeper exploration. There are stories of law officials or past law enforcement officers seeing Sasquatch, yet no deeper investigation was performed. It reminds me of the sudden closing of Project Blue Book, which were the government's investigation files of UFOs. Did they get what they needed to from the public? Did they get enough information and had another level of understanding that they didn't care to further share with the public? If Sasquatch was indeed a primate, a type of monkey, then why would the government keep the topic so covert? If one does catch or find the body of a Sasquatch, instead of being excited, they should be worried. Worried about who to tell about it. Governments, religious sects, etc. could quickly make you disappear in those forests, along with that evidence. So make sure you have a plan, you know what to do, you're prepared before you seriously go venturing into cryptozoology. Now with Bigfoot, there are many cases. So I'm not going to go through all of them, as that would take too long, and just numbering them out would also take too long. There's that many. So I'm going to mention the most notable ones, and like I said, I'm going to mention some details, enough details for you to go and explore them some more. And there's great analytical videos on different cases and footages that I mentioned within this video. Keep in mind that before we get started with the notable cases and evidence, more than 95% of sightings occur in North America and Asia. Of over 800 of these documented sightings, nearly 70% of these were at high altitudes. Here's a story of Native Americans being traumatized from killing a Bigfoot.
I live on a reservation, and the population of Native American to white other is about 50-50. Both whites and Indians have stories that they rarely tell because they are so paranormal in nature. They had become so lax and accepting of the hairy man's presence that one night, while standing on the porch, the father was yanked off by his feet in full view of the entire family. They screamed and huddled together and cried while whatever it was fought with the dad on the porch. The father was gone for days. Whatever it was that had taken him had carried him off into the night after a struggle on the porch. There was blood on the grass, and the family grabbed neighbors and men of the community to help recover the father. They had, however, found the father. He was beaten black and blue over his entire body, ribs broken, arms and legs broken. His eyes were bulging wide. He was trembling constantly. This man had been beaten badly, but something else was wrong with him. He was traumatized. He died that night. To this day, the men who went on the recovery mission to save him have kept their stories to themselves. Only a select circle, including my father, remembers these incidents. Those men found what it was that took my father. They found the hairy man, and they killed it. They shot it to death with high-power rifles and buried the body. The man who did this feels incredibly guilty. Sasquatch is a matter of fact here, and the older generation told us to avoid them and leave them alone, because they are human beings. They are not animals, and they are not magic. They can most certainly be monsters, and this is one story that corroborates that. But the hairy man, Bigfoot, is so human-like that even here, when a group of men killed one, they were so traumatized by the experience that they feel guilty of murder.
They also speak of having dreams of the creature before ever learning about it. Could it be genetic memory? That could be interesting evidence.
Because as a child, I had dreams about the hairy man and his family before I was ever exposed to the concept of Bigfoot. These dreams were frightening and unexplainable, and only made sense years later when my father related this to me.
This tribal member emptied bullets at a Bigfoot and never shot a single one. Is it a case of mind manipulation, telepathy, as we mentioned at the beginning of the video?
And I showed him where it happened, and he said, so you shot and emptied your your shells at this guy, huh? And he said, yeah. And he said, well, you picked up the shells, and there they were. I never pulled a trigger at one time.
Also, as mentioned, sounds are often heard. Those were just a few random cases to start us off. Now we're going into the timeline of the best, what I consider some of the best recorded cases, going back from the oldest one. In 1840, we have Elkanah Walker, a missionary to the Spokane Indians, who wrote that the Indians believe in a race of giants that live on a mountain. They inhabit the snowy peaks and are active at night. They steal salmon from the natives' fishing nets and eat them raw. And I quote here, "They come to the people's lodges at night when the people are asleep and take them and put them under their skins and to their place of abode without even waking them. If the people are awake, they always know when they are coming very near by their strong smell that is most intolerable. It is not uncommon for them to come in the night and give 3 whistles, and then the stones will begin to hit their houses." The Native Americans said their footprints to be 1.5 foot long. And as I mentioned in the history section, this is pretty much the first account that we hear from a missionary that spoke to the Spokane Native Americans and heard of footprints, the strong smell, and the creatures, the large creatures themselves. This is before anybody was really talking about Bigfoot and searching for footprints. I'd say an excellent piece of evidence and a great start to our timeline. 1924, Fred Beck, a miner that was among others, claimed that they shot and possibly killed at least one of these strange creatures because of an attack on their cabin, during which the creatures bombarded the cabin with rocks and tried to break in. Beck identified the creatures as mystical beings from another dimension, explaining that he had experienced psychic premonitions and visions his entire life, of which the ape men were a part. At that point, the area was named Ape Canyon, in the Mount St. Helens region of Washington state. Later in 1984, it was reported that the apes were actually YMCA members tossing rocks into the canyon, not knowing that the miners were below. Now, of course, there's no evidence that this is true. 1924, the same year, a story that in fact came to light much later in 1957, Albert Osman reported to be abducted by 4 Sasquatch and to be kept in a cave for 6 days, where he learned that they had a language and were vegetarian. He also provided this sketch. 1925, a year later, Tombazi, a photographer and member of the Royal Geographical Society, saw a creature at about 15,000 feet, in the middle of so-called nowhere and with tracks. And this is when the first kind of jump in track searches and casting really started on the Yeti in Asia. 1941, Jenny Chapman and her 3 children had to flee their house because of a Sasquatch. Police found large footprints leading through a smashed shed to a 55-gallon tub holding fish that had been pried open. 1950, Toby, at 10 years old, saw Bigfoot and said that it wore tethered clothes. This is one of the first mentionings of a Bigfoot being clothed. 1951, a climber at 20,000 feet found possible Yeti footprints that looked very unlikely to be human. 1964, Mrs. John Uptrup reported being attacked by an over 9-foot tall Sasquatch, whom her later found injured dog saved her from. This made national news as the Dewey Lake Monster. 1967, the most famous Bigfoot footage we have to this day. If you haven't seen this one, listen up. We have what we call the Gimlin-Patterson video. To this day, Robert Gimlin, who helped shoot this video, vows the authentication of the footage of a female Sasquatch and the footprints they collected. It had huge publicity since, and one of the most studied cases behind the JFK assassination. I will be covering this footage a little bit more later in this video under the best evidence section. In 1994, we have some more great video footage of a Sasquatch from Paul Freeman.
Oh, there he goes. Jesus.
From the year 2000, we get the Skookum cast. The furs were too few to prove anything, but some didn't also prove to be of an animal. Some believed the print to be of an elk or deer. 2009, during a rainstorm, I found this one a little bit different and fun. A large handprint was found on a pickup truck window. And finally, in 2015, we have the video footage named Big Red.
Oh, come on.
It's right there. I don't have my glasses on. Look at that. Holy. Oh, it's right there. It's probably like, I don't know, 150 feet. Oh, there it is. Holy crap. Holy shit. Look at that. I can see it. It looks really dark in the... When I'm looking at it, it looks quite red on the camera. I'll see what happens. I don't know if I should do this or not. It's not even... Where is it? Oh, look at this. Holy...
I hope the mentioning of those cases inspired you to look deeper into them. Now, let's explore what I find to be the best evidence out there on Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Yowie, Yeti.
There's an old Chinese proverb, and it's, what's the smartest animal in the world? And it's the one that hasn't been discovered by man.
I'm really fond of the 1840 missionary report, the report of Elkanah Walker on the Spokane Native Americans. Again, it was one of the first to mention huge footprints, rock throwing, and a strong smell. If it were to be some sort of misinterpretation, then that's sad. And if it was to be the first hoax, then what an impressive idea. As far as photography goes, there are some revealing photos out there, though I find Bigfoot photos to be even easier to fake than those of UFOs. That being said, if you do have photos of what you believe to be a Sasquatch or video footage, please do share down below or contact me privately. I find the turned over trees and the weird positioning of trees and tree branches to be interesting but not compelling enough, though there are some interesting photos and findings out there that are really almost perfectly crisscrossed trees and branches. This also brings up the idea of gifting. You place something, an assortment of sticks and stones, for example, and you leave it out in the forest, you come back and you see them rearranged as a sort of communication with Bigfoot. We have to keep in mind that raccoons are very common here. Well, it's not very likely, but it is possible. It's very possible that even a simple creature as a raccoon could actually place those things out of curiosity around and leave them there and not make it look like they were just shifted by a squirrel or something. So that's also a tough call. Thick tree branches being twisted, it depends how they were found. And again, the assortment of the gifting depends as well. It's very case by case. But the twisting of branches is a bit more interesting to me because of the sheer force that had to go into twisting that branch and the direction that it had to move that branch, whatever the force was. If it would be something natural like winds or another tree pushing another one, it's hard to find a part of a tree to be twisted off like that. Dr. Wolfhenner Fehrenbach, a zoologist that believes in Sasquatch, studied over 700 prints, and in 2006 had 15 samples of DNA he could not identify. For me as a researcher into this kind of weird stuff, when I find something that is said to be unidentified, not known, and it's like something along DNA and molecular structures, I find that really fascinating and curious why people do not go further to discover what it is or further to get the public's attention on the ambiguity of what they found. Because I would think that would be quite interesting. Here's some more great info. In 2012, a veterinarian researcher claimed that Sasquatch DNA links to that of human females who must have bred with other male beings. As far as footprint tracks being great evidence, I find that the idea of finding tracks in the middle of nowhere or at a very high altitude and having proof that you were the only one that discovered them and to be in the vicinity, I find that pretty fascinating. But personally, I wouldn't put too much attention on tracks, especially not in this day and age. They can indeed be easily created, but it's still sort of a fun Easter egg hunt, if you will. One interesting piece of so-called evidence that I found was of this Survivor Man presentation. This main, shall we call him, host of the Survivor Man TV show was a really interesting listen, as what he mentions was never mentioned in the show. And this guy knows the outdoors pretty well. It seems like some good proof of something, as he did find deer bones out in the mountains with human teeth-like scratches on them, as well as the whole tree weaving thing and trees being planted upside down. And he does mention more, and I think interestingly so, when I was reading the comments under the video, and I sort of agree with him on this, is that he presented more sort of evidence and experience with the creature than in all of the episodes of, I think the show is called Bigfoot Hunter or Monster Hunters, or both. And viewers seem to find it so, as well as myself, because of the sincerity of how he approached this topic and how he presented it. It wasn't the point of his discussion. It was sort of led there from questions. And I have to strongly state this: the more the enhanced analytical videos of different footage come out and expose the hoaxers, the more hoaxers also learn how to better in their, let's call it, craft. This gives them an opportunity to actually learn from one another, and even possibly from the real footage out there, and so to ultimately be better fakers. As with UFOs, video footage has entered into a much different spectrum of presentability in this quote-unquote modern age. I believe that no matter how perfect your video footage may be, in this and the future time of CGI, it will only prove meaningless, as immediate doubters will arise, which I find sort of scary. As I often think, what if I filmed or caught an alien on video or something like that? If I ever had strong evidence like that and put it on YouTube, especially with this many viewers, and if it was real, it wouldn't matter because people would already doubt it for how real and clear it is. They would deem it CGI and practical effects or whatever. But if it would catch strong enough attention, then wouldn't the government take it out? So it seems like we're at a point of no-win situation as far as video footage goes, except for sharing with locals around you and people that actually know you and trust that you're not lying. And this said, here are some of the more convincing motion clips I could find. Again, look deeper into them and check out some different perspectives on them, and let me know what you guys think.
Oh, there he goes. Jesus.
Another part of my best evidences that I have to mention are the missing person cases, the 411s. The book entitled Missing 411 by author David Paulides expresses that he thinks something more intriguing is afoot. His book examines more than 1,100 cases of people mysteriously vanishing from United States parks, and many of these cases involving seasoned hikers, not just beginners or families or people taking a stroll. So that book is a great source on disappearances, and from a different perspective as well. But you can also do more research just by Googling. Google disappearances at national parks, and you'll find a lot of great information as well. As mentioned earlier, I do find DNA to be a rather hot point with these best evidences, especially when they're deemed unknown, as some reports express, and are just left there without any further serious interest. If you already have some knowledge on this topic, you might be thinking, when am I going to mention the hand bones and the scalp in Tibet? And well, let's talk about it. There is a Tibetan temple that has been known to hold the hand bones and scalp of a Yeti. Now, when this information first started getting public, a man named Peter Byrne first stole some pieces of the artifact of the hand. Later, actor James Stewart smuggled more of the hand out of Tibet, out of the monastery. When tested in 1960, it was said to be closer to a Neanderthal. And keep in mind, they were stolen because the monks wouldn't let anybody get their hands on these artifacts. In 1991, testing under the TV program Unsolved Mysteries revealed it to not be human, but very close, quote-unquote near human. Then the most recent 2011 DNA testing announcement said, quote-unquote, "We have got a very, very strong match to a number of existing reference sequences of human DNA databases. End quote. To some, even that statement may be too unclear still. And being that the term Neanderthal was used, makes me find this case still quite intriguing. Unfortunately, but interestingly, the entire hand and scalp were stolen out of the monastery through a highly precise operation. Highly precise, what does that mean? Some government stole it, possibly China, or it could have been a religious sect, or it could have been some other really rich, interested people that wanted to sell it or keep it. And it was mentioned and kind of rumored that they have been seen in the black markets. So that concludes the whole artifacts of the Tibetan monastery. But does it really conclude it? In the end, those artifacts were replaced with replicas, which I think at this point, the monks of the monastery already know that they're replicas, because I think at the beginning when they were replaced, they were just given it back and they were happy, but they were never told that they were. I'm not sure about that. If that's true, that's pathetic to people act like that, to cheat them of something so valuable to them. One of the important evidences, I believe, for like personal research and interest gain and knowledge, I believe for yourself, if you're a true researcher, you will do this. This is something I did since I first started discovering weird things and reading about phenomena, aliens, and UFOs, particularly aliens. I would start asking other classmates about their experiences. And so I think one of the best evidences personally is a discussion and talking with family and friends. It's a great type of evidence of something definitely out there. And one should not be shy in approaching people with such questions. It's really not that hard. Again, personally haven't done it since 9 years old in my whole life practically. I know that you just have to figure out a way, a down-to-earth kind of approach without getting too weird or too deep into the topic, especially if they have no idea what you're talking about. A way of nonchalantly offering a feel of trust and comfort, and then let the person lead you. Reports of Bigfoot range from children to law officials to seniors that really have nothing to prove or gain from it, many of them preferring to stay anonymous. And I think that's important to underline, is that a lot of people prefer to stay anonymous, which I do think says a lot. Though keeping in mind the possibilities of such things as exaggeration and the rarity of the person being a pathological liar. The total numbers are high enough that the topic should still garnish respect. And knowing you've watched this video, you can consider yourself a researcher. So if you deem it weird or feel odd asking a family member or somebody at a store or museum if they've seen something weird, tell them you're working on a project, or you're doing some research, or you want to answer a friend's question. If you're at the start of such things and you feel too much heat on yourself for asking such questions, blame homework if we have to. Nothing should stop in the way of research. On the topic of best evidence, I want to bring up again my recent little adventure that I shared earlier in this video. When I was working on this video, I was really happy to learn that one of the, I believe, 3 Sasquatch museums in North America was located not too far. It's really nothing big, but a must stop for any enthusiast passing by. During my visit to the Sasquatch outpost in Bailey, I found this account. A man saw a Sasquatch an hour away from the outpost in the mountains and then came to the outpost and accused them of placing a fake one there. Now that's an interesting one. I also took advantage by interviewing a few of the locals as well. The owner, whom was delightful to chat with and shared somewhat an unlikely geographical past with me, her ambiguous account of possibly a hooded person, as well as the one played earlier that she heard that really piqued her interest. You know, the one with the shimmering portal and all. I also met a gentleman there that expressed his sighting of a large Sasquatch walking, as well as some he had heard. He also shared impressive UFO sightings he and his wife had, which I will cover in a future alien episode. I'm most grateful for his tales and permission to photograph him. Thanks again, Scott, and what a pleasant and insightful trip that was. Satisfied. Our short adventure, my wife and I, took us to one of the big local hotspots, Wellington Lake. As this map indicates and suggests as a nice piece of evidence, and just to see this map, it's worth going there. Plus, if you want to share any evidence of your own, this map is a great way to do it. It's a great piece of growing evidence as visitors place a pin according to their type of experience on the locale where they had it. Again, I urge anyone to stop there, especially if you had an experience, and share it on this map as well as in written form. Not to mention you have to check out the awesome display. Oh, and be sure to stop by Coney Island nearby for some awesome hot dogs. So we left and drove to Wellington Lake. Now on our little drive there on the dirt road, I did see some crisscrossing trees that looked like, well, they were created that way by strong winds, Bigfoot, or maybe somebody was coming from the outpost and wanted to fool around and did it. Now, going into the wilderness, we went with positive intentions. As usual, we found nothing extraordinary at the lake, and so enjoyed our stay there till sunset. Both a hot time and a hot spot for sightings, apparently. Of course, I did have to take advantage of the scenery with a quick sketch. And might I say, there's always something special about driving through a forest in the dark. But when doing so, always be wary of crossing animals for your safety and theirs. Now on the topic of best evidence, I told you I'd be coming back to that Gimlin footage, that greatest Bigfoot video ever. I'll admit that it's realistic, and it's a female, which already persuades many people to believe that this is authentic, because why would they make a hoax of a female Bigfoot, which would be harder to construct than a male one? But one cannot ignore Roger Patterson's past. Roger Patterson had a growing interest in Sasquatch and even spoke to many believers in 1962. He knew that if he found evidence, he would be famous, rich. He put forth thousands of hours and dollars in search of Sasquatch. He published a book in 1966 with a drawing of Bigfoot, just a year before the sighting. He had plans to film a pseudo-documentary about a hunt for Bigfoot, for which he would eventually require a Sasquatch costume for. He did visit LA for this purpose, as well as was known to try to make money through a variety of ways. He did borrow money to make the Sasquatch movie, as well as rent the camera that caught the female Sasquatch by chance. And be it noted that he also returned that camera late. He swore to the grave that everything, the prints, the video, was authentic. His partner at the time, Robert Gimlin, did not speak much of this publicly for many years after. He never denied the authenticity either. And Roger did insist to never shoot a Sasquatch. This brings to thought that maybe the hoax was known only to Roger and the mysterious costume partner, hence Roger didn't want Robert to unknowingly hurt their secret partner, while remaining truthfully perplexed about the experience. Do your own research, as many are for and against the legitimacy of this footage. There's many arguments for it being real, and there's many for it being fake. But long story short, this footage could take up an entire episode. Personally, I don't stand on either side of the crowd, but when people say that the inhuman movement or the costume quality for the time is not possible, then they put themselves in the same line of thought and brainstorm as those that disbelieve the footage. I feel the same way about many Bigfoot vocal recordings that I've heard. I think that those are possible to be created as well. A more analytical approach should be expressed, which would gain the whole phenomena greater overall respect. Just as I believe the possibility that a human could perform this in 1967, I so do believe in the possibility of an unknown bipedal creature living on this earth. And here we come to the point of discussion where I express how likely I believe, and through my research, I believe the Sasquatch to exist. And for that, we have to explore further about what it is, what it could be, the possibilities. So let's take a look at that. According to one researcher, there were 2 types of Bigfoot, making up 4 total subspecies. Another researcher says there's 12 species just in the US. This topic is deep though, because it doesn't only question whether this creature exists, it also questions our creation, our own evolution or mutations that happened along the way. I always found the small face compared to the large head fascinating. It brings up to mind the elongated skulls, aliens, and Crowley's, Aleister Crowley's, the famous dark mystics, entity drawing. It also reminds me of Boskop Man, which is said to be a variation of anatomically modern humans, yet there still seems to be much mystery about it. And more. Plus the telepathic or psychic abilities make for a really fascinating tale. Or tall tale. Maybe Lloyd Pye was right. The reason we can't find these things is because they're actually avoiding contact with us, and their habitat is exclusive and brutal to us. The panda and gorilla eluded science for years simply because their habitat is deep and difficult for us to get to. As Pai said, pandas are stupid as a bag of hammers. They can't even find each other in captivity to breed. So now imagine an animal that not only has a deeply inaccessible habitation, but is also actively avoiding us. Now there's another panda example that only helps to disprove the whole Bigfoot phenomenon. In 1979, a zoo in Holland was to display a new panda cub, but before they could show it to the public, it escaped. 2 hours later, its dead body was found, but not until 2 days later was this reported to the public in the news. Within those 2 days, over 1,000 phone calls were received about baby panda sightings. This is actually evidence that all sightings of a kind can actually be wrong, no matter how big that number may be. A true myth can be started simply with a story, a strong story, and that story will always garnish so-called evidence, because the story itself impacts the imagination to a point of delusion taking grasp of one's perception. If I were to make up a ridiculous pink monster living in a particular area and share that even with my small audience here and try to prove it with some blurry photos, reports would surely start coming in of evidence or sightings of this creature. For every single pink hint of pink that people would see in that area in their peripheral vision would be assumed to be this creature. So again, what could it be? China has a golden monkey that, a certain species or subspecies of the golden monkey that can grow up to 5 feet, if I'm not wrong. And orangutans did once inhabit China. Are these the Yeti? And there's more evidence of how easy it is for animals to avoid us. This time I call upon the billy apes, which proved how easy it is for an animal to avoid human detection in their environment. And locals did know of them for years. So not only these primates and pandas could avoid us, but a well-trained human as well. They could avoid exposure to humanity for their entire life if they wanted to. Considering if Sasquatch were to be real, there's a good chance they'd be more intelligent than, say, pandas or billy apes, and maybe even the same level as humans, or even of higher intelligence. Facial structure and comparing to other monkeys. One scientist speculates that an unhooded nose, such as those of many primates, this kind of nose anatomy can't be likely on a creature such as Sasquatch, as he believes that creatures with unhooded noses cannot survive cold climates and would freeze, or would have to migrate far to where there's high humidity and more warmth. Another gentleman I stumbled upon on YouTube was talking about the relationship and behavior between Sasquatch and autistic people, as well as gorillas, having a similarity in their behavior by being visual thinkers and also having a weak sort of ability to communicate. And again, there are those speculations that they are more advanced than this. Ron Lewis said that he'd found a grave, and at the end of a day, when he was working on the grave and trying to dig out the corpse, that night he was visited at home in his bedroom by a Sasquatch apparition, which told him to leave the grave alone. And Ron did in fact show researcher Tom Powell where that location is of that grave. He never touched it again. So that was just digging deeper into what the Sasquatch may be. Now let's take a look at all the possibilities, and this is one of my favorite parts of this series videos, is looking at all the possibilities of what this could be. And we'll examine most, if not all of it. Well, is it possible to look at all the possibilities? Let me know if you think of some below. Very generally speaking, there are two types of researchers of Sasquatch. Some that see it as an animal relating to biology as we know it and understand it, and then there's others that relate Sasquatch to alien and being somewhat metaphysical in nature and substance. I agree with how Tom Powell put it. Approach the research of Sasquatch in your own way and method, but in the end, let's get together and share notes. First, we've got to mention Gigantopithecus blacki. That's its Latin name, and it's the largest reported primate to have ever existed. And looking at its anatomy, it's basically the same as a gorilla's, just bigger, as a lot of creatures at that time were. So there's that theory that says that Sasquatch could be related, or could be a Gigantopithecus. Proving by looking at the footprints, we see that it's not, because Gigantopithecus would have the footprints of today's gorillas, more or less, just larger. If it in any way relates with the Gigantopithecus, I would say that the Sasquatch is a descendant or evolutionary descendant of the Gigantopithecus. One evolutionary branch went from a certain primate to possibly humans, and another other evolutionary branch went from Gigantopithecus to the Sasquatch we talk about today. Again, just possibilities. It has also been observed that if Sasquatch is a transitional to human being, basically the missing link we've been searching for, it would need a lot more sapien or humanoid attributes. Then there's this theory that they are Pleistocene homos, which could mean that Sasquatch is a different variation to us, but of the same type, just as we see in dogs. We have something like a Chihuahua, which is very much differently structured than, let's say, a Great Dane. We also have the Old World monkeys comparing to the New World monkeys. Maybe Sasquatch is an Old World human and we're the New World humans. Are all the Sasquatch-type creatures planet-wide related, or are even those really different from one another? Let's quickly jump through even more theories. It could be a bear or other large animal native to the area. It's very possible for bear footprints to be mistaken. Exaggerations, and I find this one to be an important one, and probably very common among the sighting or the reports, because I've seen people myself describe a snake and they stretch out their arms completely like it's 1 or 2 meters, but in reality, when I find the snake, it's only that big. And that's what happens when people don't have enough experience or knowledge of the wilderness around us. So it could be exaggerations of some natural tree or rock formations they saw, or possibly bears or dogs, or even moose young. We go back to the whole missing link idea. Bigfoot being the actual missing link, or Bigfoot being a Neanderthal. Years back, Lucy was supposed to be a big, or part of the big answer to the missing link, but now a lot of people see it as a hoax and saying that the bone structure is actually too robust, and that the way they show Lucy is they try to humanize her, whereas she would be walking more like a gorilla and covered in more fur. That's another thing to keep in mind. There's always sort of different agendas behind discovery too. Then there's the whole alien concept. We see so many sightings of UFOs that correspond with Bigfoot sightings within the same area and time. Or maybe the Sasquatch is a product, a creation of an alien species for labor, for minerals, or for searching for gold. Seeing as how Bigfoot appeared in a bedroom at night, maybe it's an alien itself, or a hybrid being of some sort. Maybe a combination of us and alien. And that takes us to the spiritual, metaphysical beings kind of theory, as many believe the Sasquatch to be spiritual keepers of the earth. They say that the star people seeded them here before they seeded us. Star people, of course, being the aliens or extraterrestrials. Sasquatch could be a shapeshifter, just like the lizard people shapeshifters, these could be shapeshifters as well. But maybe not even of some elite agendas like that, but of Native Americans, such as when we think of skinwalkers. And with shapeshifting, we have to mention the Men in Black again. Maybe the Men in Black, whatever they are, they can shapeshift into Bigfoot to survive within the forests and in their Men in Black form in our cities. There's that possibility of being a human, basically, as mentioned before, Homo sapien, just of a different mutation or evolutionary branch, a lost tribe that developed a much different look from mutations from inbreeding over generations, a different type of hominid or humanoid. Interdimensional beings, considering the report where it stepped through a shimmering portal. Maybe it was going into a different time, maybe they're time travelers. They could be deities or tree spirits. We have the Green Man from Europe, which is somewhat of a god of the forest. In Native American lore, the hairy man helped to create humanity. There's a tiny theory out there of them being plant people, like orcs. As we mentioned before with shapeshifters, it could be shamans or witches, basically hermits living out wildly in the wild and covering their bodies with outfits or just furs or even costumes to scare other people away. Then of course we can't forget demons or jinn. We have heard those reports of that sulfur and musky smell related to the undergrounds and hell. Sasquatch could be the product of an MKUltra experiment, or just human experiments in general. It could have been released into the wilderness and observed on its survival capabilities. We come back to the giants idea that we mentioned in the history portion, and there's stories worldwide that support giant lore. And we have to mention the Nephilim again, or the Sasquatch being products, creations of the Nephilim. And as far as that goes, there's a lot more research and stuff you can get into about that. Also, there's a theory that Sasquatch could just be a blurry being. Okay, that's a joke. I had to fit that in there. It's getting too serious. There's the Mormon Kane theory. Of course, Mormons seem to have the answer to everything. just as they do to who and what Quetzalcoatl was, the ancient Maya god. And as far as Bigfoot goes, that Bigfoot is Kane, but after having a mark placed by God on him that made him scary yet safe from being killed. And it is Kane who people mistaken as some strange creature phenomena. The idea of Bigfoot being a ghost, or possibly undead spirits of humans or other beings, or other greater beings. And the last sort of possibility, Bigfoot being the part of a major covert knowledge that is constantly hidden, government agents clearing out areas of evidence, hence the Men in Black appearances. Wait, is that even a theory or isn't that true?
Alright, anyway, this occurred a long, long time ago when I was 11, and that was in the summer of 1960. We always hung out in the woods, and I went by myself where the little stream was right in front of me. And I looked up the path, which was clear, and I saw him. I was frozen in position, and if you've ever had that, you know what I'm talking about. The guesstimated height, I went back years later and measured the tree, because the tree is still there. It's only about that tall.
Man.
And he stood there. And he stood there with his hands up like this, which I interpret years later as non-threatening. No hair on the hands, hair here, short hair, color similar to hers, a little redder though. Large arms, a large chest, just a big, whatever it was, human-like thing. And it had hair here, you know, wherever, just like you would have hair. And was it a boy? Fingers would have been another 2 inches longer, and you can see from the back how the fingernails would come around a little bit, not like claws. The feet were very clear, both feet very large, probably a size 18 if there is such a size. And you can see the toenails. It had 5 toes, it had 5 fingers in each hand. It was the same as a human, and you said, is it a bear? No. Bears have snouts. This had a face. Its eyes, brown eyes stared at me. Large nose. Mouth, huge mouth. Didn't open it. And there are other sightings in that region. There are other sightings of similar things throughout the South.
My name is Wendell Brockway. I'm talking about a thing that happened to me in 1958. And we went by it, and as we was going by it, I looked over to the left, and I seen this big white thing standing up yelling. And it made my hair on the back of my neck stand up. And my brother-in-law was driving, and he looked over at me and he said, Wendell, you see that? And I said, yeah, I seen it. I said, what was it? He said, I don't know, Wendell, but it's something. I said, well, turn around, let's go back and look at it. And that thing was still out there. And he was shaking his hands up and down. And he was white, had them long hairs on his arms and body. I told my wife about it, and my sister, but they didn't believe me. But I actually seen it. And James Fred Taylor was my brother-in-law. And if he was still alive, he could tell the same story. But that was back in 1958. I'm glad to be able to tell the story about it. That's all of it.
And now we come to a sort of conclusion on my thoughts of this creature, my personal view. And I have to say, what rekindled my interest, my higher interest in Bigfoot, was an account I heard years back when I was getting a tattoo. This tattoo, I believe, took 5 hours total, so we had a break and everything. And we were just chatting, and this guy, level of mind, I think my age now, about in his mid-30s or so, he told me of an account that they experienced, and he had absolutely no reason to lie to me, and it's not like we were talking about weird stuff to begin with. It just came up, as these things do often with me, and he told me about a situation where he was out in sort of, middle of nowhere, far into the mountains where there's not many people. I would say no people, but people would argue. So, where they're very scarce. I forgot if he was with someone or alone. This was, say, 10, 12 years ago, and they were fishing at a lake, I believe. And at that lake, like on an island in that lake, I don't remember, or at the coast of that lake, they saw a very large creature walking on two legs. And this guy, of course, living in Colorado, going out in nature a lot, and I think he hunted as well. He knew what a bear looks like, better than any normal bird, probably better than even myself. And what deer and other creatures in these mountains look like. So he would know if it was different. And even though black bears are known to be able to walk on two legs for a good distance, still, you can see the structure quite obviously. But he saw it well enough to convince him enough that it was something like that. When I heard that, I was more intrigued by, again, UFOs, aliens, stuff like that, since my childhood of starting to read about this. But when I heard this story from somebody that I don't even really know, and I'm not gonna see again, and learning at least in those few hours that he's not a compulsive liar or something, it honestly quite intrigued me and impacted my opinion of the whole Bigfoot phenomenon. So that's my account. I always try to share an account if I have something related to the cryptid that I discuss in the video. This is the one for Bigfoot. It's not strong, but it's decently strong for me. That's why I said previously, as evidence, it's good to talk to people, to learn that way. It's not something you can convince everybody else, but you can convince yourself or enough to develop an interest in it. That's why I say you gotta go out, look for yourself, and also talk to people. If you're really interested in this stuff, you have to get out. If I were to ask someone if they believe in Sasquatch who hasn't experienced one, then if they were of rational or somewhat researched mind on the topic, I would certainly not expect a black or white answer. Therefore, that's where I stand. The topic is a phenomenon, without evidence to neither prove it or disprove of such a creature existing here. I myself look at the knowledge of animals and how many could still be undiscovered. How many types were discovered to be indigenous to tiny areas. I would say there being a real Sasquatch out there is very possible, but no matter how much I would love it to be so, I cannot let naivety to impact my emotional and rational mind. I have met very intelligent people, extremely high IQs, whatever, that would nothing but shrug off such a topic as this, and then I met others that would embrace it. Personally, I believe, as with a lot of these strange topics, that if a person put at least 3 days of research into any of these strange phenomena type topics, they would come out not believers, but certainly more interested. I'm talking about real research, your own investigations, etc. Not just following up on the top listed cases or footage of the phenomena online and then concluding its research with Wikipedia's ultimate answers. That research doesn't do much to fuel my passion and believe in these matters, and so I wouldn't trust it for other critical thinkers either. And so now the big question and answer. The answer that you probably want to know if you've been watching my videos for a while is, do I believe in Sasquatch and Bigfoot and Yeti? Do I believe there could be a creature like this out there? I do believe that some people out there genuinely saw something they couldn't understand, something that closely resembles Sasquatch and their knowledge and their gallery of ideas and images. Unexciting as that answer is, I also have that passion for sharing knowledge about animals with people, because what saddens me is not the disbelief in Sasquatch out there, but the lack of understanding or education of animals. How can the general public be ready for such a groundbreaking new species if they cannot understand the typical behavior of a snake, an alligator, or a bear, or even their own dog? Because of my own observations, I do believe that a lot of Sasquatch encounters are with animals that people simply misrecognize or exaggerate. Just as I said with a small snake being called a giant snake, I've seen the same with spiders, especially with people that have arachnophobia. And so this is why I find the accounts where ex-hunters or hunters share these experiences quite intriguing. I think if I wouldn't have done my own research, and I mean away from books, away from the internet, actually going out and talking and exploring for myself and being face to face with people that genuinely believe they saw what they saw, I would have been much more nonchalant on the topic and more on the mindset that we have already explored so much of the land that I couldn't see myself believing such a large creature could still exist out there for so long without being found. And that's sort of the common mindset with Sasquatch. which kind of corresponds with that mindset of disbelief in aliens and UFOs, saying that they can't see something traveling that far just to fly in our sky a little bit. But people miss the other possibilities of these creatures and what they can be and where they have been the whole time. And that's because people lacking looking at other possibilities until something strong hits our research or life on this earth that bumps different ways of thinking again. But the general mindset is not very out of the box. Over the years, growing up, doing various research and living in various countries, I have also developed a distrust in government and many large establishments, including religions. I would probably even say that I believe it would be more dangerous for you to discover an alien or Sasquatch and report it to officials than perform a large-scale robbery. Imagine the possible religious drama if Sasquatch were discovered and tested to be part of our evolution. How much money the poor Vatican would lose. Or if Sasquatch were discovered to be an advanced being beyond most comprehension, just as with aliens. If that realization were to suddenly hit the people of Earth, it would be dramatic, to put it lightly. As Tommy Lee Jones put it in Men in Black, the person is smart. You can tell your friend or even your mother of something strange and explain it to them, blending into their comprehension. But the people are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it. And now for another great big question. Should Sasquatch be revealed? Should people know about him? Many people believe that he shouldn't be revealed. My answer is it depends on what Sasquatch truly is. Personally, I would be satisfied knowing of its truth, and then again, depending on what it was, I would take further steps on impacting the public in that particular direction. Whether it would be in spirituality and saving the trees, or helping to prove the theory of evolution, whatever that direction would be, as long as it would be truthful and good. And what do you think? Let me know. And now for a lighter side of things, let's take a look at some movies or recommended movies on Sasquatch, as there are so many. Let me start with these, or movies that feature Sasquatch. Actually, maybe instead of listing movie, I should list documentaries, but those can be so hard to track, and being on YouTube, I'm sure you can find interesting ones right on the sidebar here. So let's begin with some earlier ones. We have 1957, The Abominable Snowman. Then we have 1972, The Legend of Boggy Creek, a documentary-style movie. Then we have Sasquatch, The Legend of Bigfoot, 1976. And do I really have to mention Harry and the Hendersons? During this age of movies and later, most become badly directed, written, and or designed horror movies. Just Google Sasquatch movies and you'll see a list. But to save you a moment, here are the top Bigfoot movies you can find out there according to quite a few lists out there. Abominable, 2006. I watched this one recently, and I felt the acting wasn't too bad, certainly not as bad as with many Sasquatch movies. There's certainly an interesting situation in the movie. It was enjoyable. I only wish the Sasquatch's face was done better. Bigfoot the movie, 2015. Willow Creek, 2013. Exists, 2014. The Wild Man of Navidad, 2008. Bigfoot, The Lost Coast Tapes, 2012. Letter from the Big Man, 2011. Love in the Time of Monsters, 2014. In Search of... Bigfoot, 1976. The Creature from Black Lake, 1976. Southern Fried Bigfoot, 2008. Snow Beast, 1977. Valley of the Sasquatch, 2015. Pursuit of a Legend, 2010. And you are most welcome to share great Bigfoot movies you've seen that I haven't listed on here down below, or also let me know which ones of these you did enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, this was an episode to get many beginner enthusiasts started on the great search of Sasquatch, or to serve as a quick resource for mid to advanced researchers, as well as material for deeper questioning on this matter. And please, if I made a mistake with such as a name, or I missed an important account that I should have mentioned some evidence, some cases, or I got my facts wrong, please let me know down below. And if you've ever experienced something squatchy, again, please share with us. Comment down below or private message me if you want to stay anonymous. You can do so by going to the About tab at the channel homepage, and you can find the link to private message me there. All in all, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I believe it was my most researched yet. Please do let me know what mysterious creature you would like me to discuss next in this Cryptozoology playlist. And know that you can find me on Facebook. You can chat with me there. I'm also on Instagram. I share my artwork and creature pictures over there. You can also chat with me there. I also update and sometimes do quick live videos on there. So it's a great place to connect with me. And I think that's about it. So until next time, you've been watching pretty much all about everything you ever wanted to know about Bigfoot. Only here at the World of Monsters.